Today I wanted to share with you the history of a ship that was so influential for ocean liners and cruise ships I can't cover it all in one video. So this is part 1 of the history of this ship. Today I'll be talking about the SS France.
Millions stood in awe when the Normandy first reached America on its triumphant maiden voyage. Again, millions line the New York and New Jersey shores to sadly observe the passing of the doomed and ill-fated ship.
Before we talk about the SS France, we need to talk about the French line and the ships that would influence the France. The original SS France was one of the great four-stackers that sailed the North Atlantic before World War I. She was followed up by the extremely popular and beloved Ile-de-France, which remained extremely popular over a career that would last decades. And finally, and arguably most influential, there was the SS Normandy. The Normandy was the French line's answer to the Queen Mary, and it was an incredible answer to say the least. The Normandy really was something special. She was one of the fastest, largest, and most luxurious ships of her day. Looking at the overall design of the ship, both on the outside and the inside, it's absolutely remarkable that this is an ocean liner we're looking at, and not an opera house or a grand palace. Now I'm sure you all know the story of the Normandy, but just in case you don't, I'll give a brief look into the history of the ship. The Normandy was launched in 1932, and for about 8 years, she was the greatest ocean liner in the world. When World War II broke out, the Normandy found herself in New York Harbor. She was seized by the Americans in 1941, as they had the intent of using her as a troop ship. Unfortunately, a fire broke out inside the Normandy, and she sank in New York Harbor. Now this sinking could have been prevented, but I'll have to talk about that when I inevitably make a video on the Normandy. Soon after the fire, the wreck was raised, and it was originally planned to turn the hull into an aircraft carrier named the USS Lafayette. However, this never materialized, and the Pride of France was scrapped. This was devastating, not just to the French line, who had lost their ship of the future, but also to the French people, whose symbol of national pride was lost during a very dark time in French history. Once the war was over, the country of France, as well as the French line, decided they were going to build a new symbol of national pride, a new Normandy, if you will. The ship was designed to be one of the fastest, largest, and most luxurious ships afloat, and in addition, she would be designed with special emphasis on fire safety, just like the SS United States. In 1956, the French line will place an order on their new vessel to be named after the country she was sailed for, and it was here that the SS France was born. The SS France was laid down on October the 7th, 1957, and launched on May 11th, 1960 by, excuse my pronunciation, I speak English and German but not French, Union de Gaulle. The ship was 66,343 gross registered tons, with a length of 1,035 feet. The ship had 12 decks, and a top speed of 30 knots. As I said earlier, the France was designed to be almost completely fireproof. One way this was achieved was the elimination of large sweeping rooms that were found on the Normandy. Now, yes, they looked absolutely beautiful, but they also allowed fire to spread incredibly quickly throughout the vessel, and it was those same beautiful interiors that ultimately would kill the Normandy. Now that doesn't mean the France had ugly interiors. In fact, far from it. I personally adore the look of the ship's interiors, as everything from her multiple dining rooms to her lounges and indoor pool are absolutely beautiful. My favorite spot on the ship has to be the main dining room, as I'm a big fan of how it's sunken in with an almost domed looking roof. The ship would set out for her maiden voyage on February the 3rd, 1962. She would sail from Le Havre to New York, and when she arrived in New York, she was met with a water salute and great fanfare from the general public. Almost immediately, the France was being considered a new Normandy, as she was incredibly popular on the North Atlantic. The ship wasn't the largest or the most luxurious, but it could be argued she was the most beloved, as the France routinely sailed almost completely full. The French line had done it. They had made a new Normandy, or so they thought. Unfortunately, the France's maiden voyage coincided with the beginning of the aviation industry. Most people who wanted to cross the Atlantic did so by an airplane, and this left companies like Cunard and the French line with a very small amount of potential customers. As a direct response to this, the France suddenly became more of a burden to the French line. That is, unless she was doing cruises. In that respect, the France was actually still doing quite well, but unfortunately, occasional cruising could not save the ship. All in all, the France's glory years only lasted about a decade, and as the dawn of the 1970s approached, the death of the France loomed large. The death of the SS France sounds like something that was made up for a movie. However, I assure you it's entirely true. On a voyage to New York, the France's crew decided to go on strike in order to protest the fact that the French line's subsidies had been eliminated in order to put more money into a new symbol of national pride, Air France. The strikers demanded that the ship be allowed to continue to serve, along with a 35% wage increase for themselves. Their strike failed, as the night of the takeover proved to be the ship's final day in service for the struggling French line. It took over a month for the standoff to end, but on December the 7th, 1974, it did, and so with it did the France. The SS France was more than just an ocean liner for the French line. She was a symbol of pop culture, and the pride of her nation after the losses that had occurred during World War II. Not only that, she was the final bow for ocean liners, and I think she ended that era of transportation incredibly well. So now, with all of that out of the way, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and remember to stay tuned for part 2 of this video, where I'll talk about the SS Norway. Anyways, with all of that out of the way, thank you all so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one, and peace out.